Right now, you think you're in control. You think you chose what to wear this morning. You think you decided how to feel when someone ignored your message. You think your opinions are yours. What if most of what you do, feel, and believe was decided before you were even fully awake? What if the real story of human behavior has been running quietly beneath the surface your entire life, and no one ever handed you the manual? Today, that changes. For over a century, psychologists, researchers, and behavioral scientists have been asking one of the most important questions a human being can ask. Why do we do what we do? Not just the big decisions, the career choices, the relationships, the life-altering moments, but the small ones too. Why do you scroll your phone when you're anxious? Why do you pull away from people you love when you're hurting the most? Why do you sometimes sabotage the very things you worked hardest to build? Psychology Today, one of the most respected platforms in the field of human behavior, has spent decades gathering, translating, and sharing the answers science has uncovered. And what those answers reveal is both humbling and deeply liberating. Because here's the truth. Understanding why you behave the way you do isn't about finding someone to blame. It's about finding the door and finally walking through it. Let's open it together. Imagine an iceberg. The tip, the small fraction you can see above water, that's your conscious mind, the thoughts you're aware of, the decisions you think you're making. But the massive, silent, invisible bulk underneath the surface, that's everything else. And psychologists tell us that up to 95% of our mental activity happens down there, beneath awareness, beneath logic, beneath intention. Sigmund Freud was the first to name this shadow world, though his ideas have been refined and challenged ever since. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what early psychology suspected. The brain is constantly running background processes, emotional memories, learned fears, deep-seated beliefs about whether you are worthy, safe, or loved. And those processes shape your behavior before your conscious mind even gets a vote. Think about the last time you overreacted to something small, a tone of voice, a look, a message left unread. Your conscious mind said, "This shouldn't bother me." But something deeper said, "I've felt this before, and it hurt." That's not weakness. That's your unconscious mind doing its job, protecting you based on everything it has learned. The problem is, it learned those lessons in the past, and it doesn't always know when the past is over. This is where psychology becomes a mirror, not to judge you, but to show you. We live in a world that is deeply uncomfortable with emotion. Cry too much, you're weak. Don't cry enough, you're cold. Get angry, you're dangerous. Never get angry, you're a pushover. Feel too deeply, you're dramatic. Feel too little, you're broken. No wonder so many people are exhausted. But here's what the science actually says. Emotions are not your enemy. They are your most ancient communication system. Long before human beings had language, we had feeling, and those feelings told us what to move toward and what to run from. They kept us alive. The research of psychologist Paul Ekman identified emotions that appear across every culture on Earth: joy, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, disgust. These aren't cultural inventions, they're biological signals hardwired into us over thousands of years of evolution. The problem isn't that we feel. The problem is that most of us were never taught what to do with what we feel. Psychologists call this emotional regulation, the ability to experience an emotion without being consumed by it. And the people who are best at it aren't the ones who feel the least. They're the ones who understand what they feel, name it, and choose how to respond rather than simply react. There's a concept in psychology called the window of tolerance. Think of it as your emotional comfort zone, a space where you can feel things fully without shutting down or exploding. When something pushes you out of that window, you either freeze, fight, or flee. Learning to widen that window is one of the most powerful things a human being can do. When you were young, very young, you were handed a story. Not in words, in experiences, in how the adults around you responded when you cried, when you succeeded, when you failed, when you needed something, in whether the world felt safe or uncertain, loving or unpredictable. And from those experiences, your mind drew conclusions. Not always logical ones, but deeply felt ones. I have to be perfect to be loved. If I get too close, I'll get hurt. I'm not the kind of person who succeeds. My feelings don't matter. These are core beliefs, and once they're wired in, they become the lens through which you see everything. They color your relationships, your ambitions, your sense of worth. They become so familiar that they don't even feel like beliefs anymore. They feel like facts. And this is where the research from cognitive psychology becomes genuinely life-changing, because what science shows us repeatedly across cultures, across decades of study, is that the mind is not fixed. The story is not final. A concept called neuroplasticity tells us that the brain continues to change and rewire throughout our entire lives. The beliefs you formed at age 5 or 15 or 35, they are not permanent. With awareness, with intention, and often with the right support, the narrative can shift. Not overnight, not without effort, but it can shift. That thought alone is worth sitting with. Here is something most people don't realize about relationships. The way you relate to others is almost always a reflection of the relationship you had with yourself and with the first people who shaped you. Psychologist John Bowlby spent decades studying what he called attachment theory, how the bonds we form in early childhood become the blueprint for every close relationship we have as adults. If you learned early on that love was consistent and safe, you likely approach relationships with a sense of security. You can be close without losing yourself. You can handle conflict without assuming it means the end. But if love was inconsistent, sometimes warm, sometimes withdrawn, you may find yourself anxious in relationships, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, or conversely, pushing people away before they can leave first. None of this is your fault, but here's what matters. Knowing this can change everything. Because when you recognize a pattern, you are no longer inside it, you are watching it from the outside. And from outside the pattern, you have a choice. Psychology teaches us something called earned security, the idea that even if you didn't receive the attachment you needed early in life, you can develop it. Through therapy, through deeply honest relationships, through deliberate self-understanding. The wounds of connection can be healed through connection. That's not a platitude, that's peer-reviewed science. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you were truly honest with yourself? Not the version you show the world, not the version that has the right answers at the right moments, the one underneath, the one that gets quiet at 2 in the morning and wonders if any of this is going the way it was supposed to. Psychology isn't just a science. At its best, it's an invitation to stop performing and start understanding, to stop asking, what is wrong with me, and start asking, what happened to me, what did I learn, and is it still true? Because here is what decades of research, thousands of studies, and millions of hours in therapy rooms have confirmed. Most of the pain people carry isn't weakness. It's wisdom that came too early, from experiences that were too hard at an age when there was no way to make sense of them. You adapted, you survived, and the very strategies that helped you survive may now be the walls keeping you from the life you actually want. You are not broken. You are patterned, and patterns, unlike flaws, can be changed. Here is what I want you to take away from today. Your behavior makes sense. Even the parts of it you're ashamed of, even the parts that have cost you, even the parts you've promised yourself you'd change 100 times, they make sense. They were built by real experiences, real pain, real learning. But you are not just the product of your past. You are also the architect of your future. Every time you pause before reacting, that's psychology in action. Every time you name what you're feeling instead of swallowing it, that's emotional intelligence growing. Every time you question a belief that limits you, that's your brain rewiring, slowly and surely, in a new direction. Science is clear. Awareness is the beginning of change. Not willpower, not perfection, not starting over from scratch. Just awareness. Honest, compassionate, patient awareness. Psychology today has spent decades reminding the world that the human mind is not something to fear or suppress or optimize like a machine. It is something to understand, to tend, to be curious about. And curiosity, real curiosity about why you think, feel, and behave the way you do, may be the most underrated superpower you possess. You've carried a lot, you've learned a lot, and you are, right now, more capable of change than you may have ever been told. The question isn't whether you can understand yourself better. The question is, are you ready to?